Pleasant good evening to each and everyone. Welcome to the launch of the book Bindi. Thank you to each and everyone for coming out this afternoon and joining with us as we assemble here for this landmark occasion. The Bindi is derived from the Sanskrit word bindu and is a red dot between the eyebrows and is of both decorative and religious significance. It is worn by women of any marital or racial status. This book, this publication, Bindi, was edited by Ms. Rosanne Kanhai, and in this book she uses the Bindi to characterize how Indo-Caribbean women come into their own in multiple ways. This book, we find that it reflects a variety of disciplines, styles, and topics that include considering Indo-Caribbean women in creative texts, in the interactions with their others in both the Caribbean and its diaspora, and the narratives of itself. This interdisciplinary text has been adopted for coursework in the United States, Europe, and the Caribbean. The written works that compile this book include pen contributions from various authors, including Sherian Singh, Valerie Yusuf, Halima Sadia Qasim, Brenda Gopi Singh, Dr. Gabrielle Hussein, Dr. Kumar Mahabir, and others. Bindi comes as a sequel to the book Matikur, The Politics of Identity for Indian Caribbean Women, and whereas Matikur focuses on raising consciousness in Indo-Caribbean communities, Bindi evaluates the effects of this movement on women. So we see that this book is actually very relevant to today's society, and we look forward to this book being well received by all through this launch. And so we move right into the program, and we ask you all to stand for the national anthem. We move straight into our program for this evening's proceedings by inviting a young woman, Anila Balkaran, to the podium to bring to you perspectives of a young Indo-Hindu woman. Anila Balkaran is a member of the Hindu Prachar Kendra and the NCIC UTAM. She's a past president of the Hindu Students' Council. She holds a BSc in government at the University of the West Indies. She has a master's in arts in South Asian area studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and she is currently pursuing her master's in philosophy at the Jawaharlal Nehru University of New Delhi. Put your hands together and welcome Anila Balkaran to the podium.
I was asked to speak today on the book as a young Hindu Indo-Trinidadian woman, which is quite a mouthful. It is all the identities that have been placed upon me, and that I accept myself and reject myself at times. That is the multifacetedness of the Indo-Caribbean woman. Gabrielle Hussein, in her chapter, No Pure Place of Resistance, Reflections on Being Miss Mastana Bahar 2000, states, I have stopped maintaining a claim to a racialized, sexualized, feminized self. At times I identify with and reproduce these identities and their hegemonic meanings, but I do so transgressively, playfully, seriously, rebelliously, performatively, and unpredictably, in ways and as forms of power that I am still defining. After a long time working towards the maintenance of and clinging to these identities, I have arrived at a place where I can now call on them at will, reject them at will, choose to take these identities and the parameters which define them seriously and to heart, and choose to reject them on any given day, at any given time. That I can be all these things and much more, I have discovered. Although I do acknowledge that I can do this after a long struggle by many for those identities of Indian, Hindu, and woman to be acknowledged alongside Trinidadian, and I continue that struggle, though I define myself within and beyond these terms. Rosanne Kanhai states in her introduction that every Indian woman on every occasion designs her own bindi, and after each wearing it is washed away again to be joyously reconceptualized at another time. Each facet of the bindi is in constant negotiation and recreation, as are the choices that Indo-Caribbean women make in their lives. Indeed, this reflects the life of every woman, and in fact every human. We constantly negotiate our lives around our multiple identities, our multiple personas, our multiple responsibilities, our multiple settings and situations. There is no essentialized self, though at different times we can choose to call upon an identity or persona that we think works for that situation. As I read Valerie Youssef's article, Finding Self in the Transition from East to West, even though Valerie implores us that the three women she interviewed must speak for themselves without fear or judgment, and that the reader must do their best to not judge, I found it difficult to come to terms with the uncertainty of the interviewees who were having a difficult time articulating their Indianness and their Trinidadianness or their in-betweenness. And this, I feel, is because they view themselves along this continuum with Trinidadian on one side and Indian on the other, and that they have to situate themselves somewhere firmly in between. Whether it is more to one side or the other, it must be in some fixed location, when in fact, we can negotiate and renegotiate these positions every day, by the hour, by the minute if we wish. And at times it can seem quite contradictory. I like to use the example of the Hindu woman who can go to Shivratri celebrations on the Sunday night and come Tuesday be jumping up in the mass. She can negotiate her identity both within and outside the parameters of what is expected of her as an Indian woman and as a Trinidadian woman. And though I have come to view myself in this way, I recognize that others do not, and also that the ways in which we have come to think of ourselves in this modern era, as an ethnic group, as a member of a religious group, as a part of a nation with an imposed national identity, as of a particular race, as of a particular gender, we can't see ourselves as fluid, which I think is something Valerie's girls suffer from, that they are fluid but can't see themselves as such as they try to fix their identity to a point. And I think as a Hindu I have learned about this fluidity both through history and through philosophy. For one, I don't believe that Hinduism is a religion that can be defined in any one single way. I don't believe that any religion can be, but more so for Hinduism given its historical circumstances, where what was labeled Hindu was basically everything which existed within the land of Al-Hind, the land beyond the Sindh River. And over time, and also due to the hegemonizing presence of colonialism from the West, after which we have patterned this thing called religion, we have sought to define the boundaries of Hinduism, as others, such as Sikhs and Buddhists, have come to define themselves apart from Hinduism. But having drawn those boundaries, we have restricted some of what we can be. So I believe in a Hinduism that basically encompasses almost everything under the sun. And philosophically, drawing from the Vedantic tradition, all things are temporal aside from the one true self, the Atma, the self that is present in all things and everywhere. So I can dress myself differently every day, but my true self, which is in all selves, remains unchanged. That's the constant. But being, as I am, swallowed up in Maya, and as of now unwilling to untangle myself, I choose to be that temporality. I appreciate being in flux. As I have drawn from Hinduism, I must commend Sharyan Singh and Halima Saadia Kazim for highlighting that Indo-Caribbean women have found strength in their religions that are often depicted as oppressing them, and that on their own terms they have found ways to draw strength from and negotiate texts and patriarchies. It challenges the dichotomy of tradition and modernity, that traditions are fixed and somehow modernity is in flux, and the truth is they are both very temporal and historically situated. And traditions are constantly renegotiated, recreated, and reimagined, and modernities are multiple. One criticism I have of the text, and maybe Pandita can correct me if I'm wrong, is in the naming, Bindi. It has to do with the explanation and definition of Bindi in the introduction, and I am concerned with naming as for the sake of clarity and understanding, and more so in a multicultural society where the written word creates and reproduces knowledge or knowledge structures. I was looking at a YouTube video of Marshall and Drupati in a concert singing Indian Girl, and Marshall, trying out a rude pun, asked the crowd, "What is the Hindi term for an auntie?" His answer was a nanny, which probably left the crowd very confused. All I can say is it kind of leaves me confused about Douglas poetics and what side in that mixing power relations lie. But back to my point, as far as I know, a bindi is exclusively worn by women, and it's not so much a religious marking as a cultural one. It can be fashionable or it can be plain, but it does mark you as an Indian woman, or perhaps sometimes as a white American pop star, whichever you identify with. A tilak or tikka, on the other hand, is always either a powder or paste, and most times is a religious marking, or a mark that wards off evil, or keep one safe and can be worn by any gender. So not all forehead dots are bindis, and I am also unsure, not that I'm saying we can't authenticate it, but I am unsure about how prevalent the bindi has been as shringar for Indo-Caribbean women before the advent of Bollywood, and before we became more aware of fashions from India. Perhaps our identities are like saris. We can tie whichever way we see fit, change on a regular basis, or choose not to wear at all. Even so, I'm not even sure about the sari, because I think that is also relatively new to us Indo-Caribbean women. So that's my little contribution. Thank you.
We now welcome to the podium Dr. Gabrielle Hussein. Dr. Gabrielle Jamila Hussein is a lecturer at the Institute of Gender and Development Studies, University of the West Indies. Her research and teaching focuses on Caribbean feminism, sexualities, and governance. Dr. Hussein's publications include contributions to anthropology and individual fieldwork identities, self and subject in ethnographic methods, and others. Her contribution to Bindi is an article entitled Finding Self in the Transition from East to West. Let us welcome Dr. Gabrielle Jamila Hussein.
So much for coming. I'm here tonight to bring greetings and to welcome you all on behalf of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, St. Augustine Campus. We are very pleased to be co-hosting this event with the Hindu Women's Association. We, not too long ago actually, hosted another book launch of Joan Rawlins' book on women over 50, I think, and we're pleased to participate in furthering and supporting and helping to promote writing on women's lives, and in this case on Indo-Caribbean women's lives. Indo-Caribbean women's writing has included poetry, fiction, scholarship, personal writings, and has spanned themes ranging from traditional healing practices to memories of land and labor, to gender negotiations in families, as well as through education, sexuality, music, and popular culture, as well as, of course, as reflections on the intersections of Indian women's experiences with Caribbean feminisms. As you will hear tonight, this collection, Bindi, The Multifaceted Lives of Indo-Caribbean Women, like Manticore, Rosanne Kanhai's earlier edited collection, is in dialogue with this history of writing, and the Institute for Gender and Development Studies is pleased to be able to enable us all to be here today to celebrate this book and to celebrate the authors that have contributed and its overall contribution to the scholarship on Indo-Caribbean women. Before I leave the podium, I would like to let you all know that the Institute, the journal that comes out of the Institute, it's an open access online journal. It's available to anyone who has access to the internet. It's called the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies. And the journal's latest issue is on Indo-Caribbean feminisms, and it focuses on crossings in geography, discourse, and politics. So if you Google Caribbean Review of Gender Studies, you will also be able to find another text that is also in dialogue and very much builds on Roseanne's work so far. And that issue contains essays, gender dialogues, photos, and poetry essays, and poetry, which, like this collection that we're celebrating tonight, brings together scholars of different generations in dialogue about the lives of Indo-Caribbean women and the shifts in their, or I should say our, gendered realities. So welcome to you all. Thank you very much for being here on behalf of the Institute and the Hindu Women's Organization, who we continue to partner with and to be very happy in doing so. And I know that we have a pleasant evening ahead, and we do have books that we hope that you all take home when you leave. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker is no stranger to the Hindu Women's Organization. She has been with us throughout our Marriage Act discussions, which we held last year for International Women's Day. And she is here with us again, joining in this launch of the book Bindi. She is a graduate of the University of West Indies with a BSc major in psychology, a minor in gender studies. She is currently enrolled in a Master Philosophy program in interdisciplinary gender studies. Her thesis topic concerns marriage and divorce practices amongst Muslim Trinidadians. She's a former secretary of the board of directors of the Bambu Jama and Bambu Jama Youth Group. Welcome to Sarah Nabi.
Assalamu alaikum. My purpose here today is not to present an abridged version of Bindi. One, it is next to impossible, and two, it would be an injustice to both the authors and yourselves. I am here to encourage and hopefully entice you all to read and pick up, at the very least, a personal copy of Bindi. When this book was first given to me, my first thought took me back to class last year. I remembered a colleague of mine during a class review saying, and I am paraphrasing here, that as a Caribbean woman, and even more so as a Trinidadian woman of East Indian descent, there is a limit to the number of correlations and parallels she can identify with in Black feminisms and other minority group feminism topics and subjects that we studied at IGDS. Where is the Indo-Caribbean literature, both on the shelf and in the classroom? That comment struck a chord with me, and I can say now, thankfully, Bindi is adding to the existing well of knowledge, and hopefully it will become but a Bindi in the ocean of knowledge that is Indo-Caribbean literature. It is heartening for me that my teachers, for I see all of these authors as my teachers, to have taken the initiative and dedication to compile these articles. In my research, I had already come across and used a couple of these, and it's a personal joy to see Qasim sharing a cover with both Hussein's and Singh, to name a few. This collection illustrates the emergence of Indo-Caribbean writers, as Paula E. Morgan is referring to in her contributing article, which, and I quote, offer their perspectives on what has now become a perennial issue for people of the region who are still grappling with the aftermath of the historic encounter between worlds. I want to now quickly reflect on what the book meant to me, a young, well, relatively, Indo-Trinidadian Muslim. The first two characteristics I had no control over whatsoever. Blame my parents on colonization. But the last identifier, that is Muslim, is a conscious one. Yes, I was born Muslim, but throughout my life of learning and thinking, I stayed Muslim. And as a literate, free-thinking Muslim, I think that this book is a feminist success and a celebration of Islam. Why do I say this? The eyebrows are up. What does Islam have to do with anthropological and feminist writings? Islam promotes education. In fact, it commands it. Iqra, which means read. I looked up Iqra's grammatical construct, and it comes from the root word of 3 Arabic letters, Qaf, Ra, and Alif, and it is in the imperative second person singular tense. So it is a command, read. So rationally, Muslims should be readers, should be. So any book with the purpose of educating the reader of something beneficial to them meets this Muslim's approval. In addition, in Surah Rum, that means the Romans, Surah 30, ayah or passage 22, the translation, and of his signs, the diversity of your languages and your colors. Indeed, in that are signs for those of knowledge. And I also checked another translator, just to back it up, and diversity is replaced with variations. Languages and colors remain the same. Those of knowledge is replaced by those who know. Indo-Caribbean people are a subset, and Indo-Caribbean women are an even smaller subset of humanity. And within the Indo-Caribbean English, languages like Hindi, Arabic, and Urdu weaves in and out of our sentences seamlessly. Diversity of language and colors. Not flora and fauna colors, but this ayah refers to people, i.e. your colors. And this is what Bindi is to me, an admirable illustration of one of humanity's colors. And Iqra was not a Muslim exclusive privilege or a message limited to persons of a particular race, status, or gender in its implementation. Human beings saw to that. It took a while for us to know that a person has a right to read and for the opportunity to come to the masses. Regrettably, some are still not given this right. The women's movement took up the slack of bringing literature about and including women, and now feminist work is helping to ensure that women's voices are heard, their stories written, and their narratives validated by society. It came as no surprise to me that IGDS is assisting the Hindu Women's Organization with the task of promoting Bindi. The articles, they are excellent, insightful, exciting pieces that everyone should read. My colleague Anila provided some tasty samples of some of these. We all have a social responsibility to pursue knowledge, and it makes sense to learn about cultures we have encountered on an everyday basis for a significant period of time, if not our entire life. But this is a review, so read Bindi. I guarantee you will learn or think of at least 5 things about Indo-Caribbean women you did not think to ponder before or treat with the critical thinking that they deserve. Thank you very much.
At this point in the program, we welcome Ms. Vishala Siudat, who is a 20-year-old student of the University of the West Indies. She is a member of the Hindu Prachar Kendra, the Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, and she also dances with the Kala Mandir. She is here to perform for us a recitation of the poem Ramprasad
by Professor Rosanne Kanhai. Ramprasad. I move the syllables around my mouth, pulling my lips. All the facial muscles responded easily, up to the eyebrows, down the chin, across the ears. Ramprasad smelled of oleander and the tulsi tree my grandmother planted on the altar facing the sunrise. Ramprasad, Basmatiya, Gangadai, echoes of India, women who refuse the names of husbands or fathers. At 5 years, Ramprasad took her copybook and pencil, went to school with the neighbor's daughter. "What is your name?" What your mother call you? Ramprasad became Rosie Philip. The saints' names were saved for the real Christians, which left names of flowers for the Indian girls. And wasn't Philip husband of the queen? Rosie Philip. I moved the syllables around my mouth. I did not have to stretch my lips too wide, did not disturb the eyebrows, the chin, the ears. I am Rosie too, named after Rosanne McCoy, sex goddess of the silver screen. I am my father's favorite. Rosanne McCoy smelled of the brillo in his hair, old spice on his face, kiwi polish on his two-toned shoes as he got ready for the Saturday matinee. He took me to church himself, explained afterwards. It's easier for them to go through life with Christian names. And that name took me far into Babylon until I smelled of lecture halls, laser printers, cancer surgery. I met Ramprasad when her daughter was marrying my son, 1 month into my medical leave. After the ceremony, I asked, "What shall I call you? There must be a name for two mothers." She fumbled her glasses, caressed her sari. "There's a word. I don't know if you can say it." She made the secret sound. That is the pain of indentation. We agreed on Rosie.
We next move to remarks from Professor Pat Mohammed on the topic Bindi and Indo-Caribbean feminism. Professor Pat Mohammed is a senior lecturer and head of the Mona Unit, Center of Gender and Development Studies, Mona, Jamaica. She has published and written extensively in the fields of women and gender studies over 20 years. Amongst her major publications are Gender Negotiations Among Indo-Trinidadians, 2001, and a volume co-edited with Catherine Shepard, Gender in Caribbean Development, 1998, a reprint. She recently published Imaging the Caribbean, Cultural and Visual Translation, 2009, and a 6-part film series. She has produced and directed 10 films, among them A Sustainable Distance, 2007, and Engendering Change, Caribbean Configurations. Put your hands together and welcome Professor Pat Mohammed.
Before doing greetings, may I just correct one error, which because of our internet keeps me somehow pinned to Mona Unit, which I still like, but I left Mona many years ago and joined this campus and have been at this campus for many years, so I'm no longer head of the Mona Unit. Dr. Kanhai, our guest, as well other honored guests today, members of the Hindu Women's Organization and president, my colleagues of the University of the West Indies, I see some of us around, my colleagues of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies who also have supported this launch, which I know we are fully embracing. My fellow presenters, the Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, and good evening. I want to welcome again Roseanne to this launch, the Faculty of Social Sciences, which has launched many a feminist book as flagships of the gender studies cohort, if you like. And this one joins that range of books. So it is fitting, if you like, that it is launched in this venue. In his 2001 Nobel lecture, V.S. Naipaul makes an insightful observation about the mindset of the Indo-Caribbean population. What was past. I suppose that was the general attitude, he says. And we Indians, immigrants from India, had that attitude to the island. We lived for the most part ritualized lives, and were not yet capable of self-assessment, which is where learning begins. End quote. Over the last 2 decades, the outpouring of non-fiction and fiction by and on Indo-Caribbean women has in fact been directly engaging in this project of self-assessment and learning. In this rainstorm of poems, short stories, novels, academic books and essays written by Indo and non-Indo-Caribbean women writers within the region and abroad, we now have a body of work that also requires its own careful self-assessment. This is where Dr. Rosanne Kanhai has added not only her own touch, as she's certainly one of the creative writers in the midst, as we heard from the poem Ramprasad, but she has also provided an insider-outsider lens that has been crucial to eliciting trends and providing a conceptual and metaphoric handling from which to examine the material that is emerging, to discern what different writers are coming with and from when they come from different religions and different theoretical standpoints. One cannot speak of Bindi, The Lives of Indo-Caribbean Women, the book that is being launched today, without linking it to her previous edited book, Matikor, The Politics of Identity for Indo-Caribbean Women. Rosanne herself says that Bindi begins where Matikor ends. The first book, Matikor, as the subtitle clearly establishes, charts out another space, a space for another experience in the colonial storm of relations that ensued, with each group carving out and refashioning some lines of its original blueprint into the woodwork of new nation identity. Both publications are a collective project rather than the singular voice of the author or theorist. Rosanne allows this multiplicity to fracture any notion of homogeneity, even within the composite of the Indo-Caribbean. The books were published 12 years apart, allowing for changing ideas in various disciplines, including gender, history, and cultural studies. If Matikor focused on the internal and private, drawing from the exclusively licentious, perhaps female-centered space provided by the pre-marriage ritual of the Matikor ceremony, then Bindi is in contrast an external symbol, a signifier of status, whether married and unmarried, and age, and obvious to the viewer. Again in Bindi, we see Rosanne's willingness to unsettle the safe space of homogeneity and stereotype. The subtitle, to remind you, is The Multifaceted Lives of Indo-Caribbean Women. We find in this book reference to women in the Ramayana tradition by Sherian Singh, marriage and dowry arrangements among the Islamic population by Halima Kasim, who I think is present here, if Halima wants to, since I'm signifying those present. References to Indo-Caribbean women's art by our own Brenda Gopi Singh, Indian Women as Healers by Kumar Mahaber, who I also see in the audience, and at last, an acceptance of gender roles and Indian womanhood as constantly being constructed, even reinvented, rather than as a fixed identity at birth, as is often assumed of femininity in general. And I think this space of reinventing, even reinventing the word Bindi, perhaps for me is welcome, because it is in this refashioning that we find new dimensions and we find the way in which culture actually proceeds, living culture. With That area of expansion, if you like, we see in the essays, and that broadening out of identity, we see in the essays by Shahida Hussein, Valerie Yusuf, and Gabrielle Hussein, Anita Batch, and Paula Morgan. I know Paula was here, and Gabrielle is here. So I think some of the scholars some of the writers are here present. I know that the book has already won the UWI Press Best-Selling Collection Award this year, and I think we should give Rosanne a clap for that. Signifying its new contributions to the kind of scholarship that the press stimulates in the region and elsewhere. It will have different uses for every reader, and no doubt, as with Maticore, become a classic addition to our collections on Trinidad in particular. Each body of work produced by a writer is unfinished, a dialogue with oneself and others. Its importance lies not on whether it has answered all the questions, but more so, how it makes us think of possibilities as we read. Certainly in connecting and focusing on these two primarily Hindu-based signifiers of Maticore and Bindi, I also began to think of what signify the freedoms or confines that relate to women in Islam, as Sarah perhaps has begun to do. Was it clothing or more subtle forms of control of sexuality, like the concept of fitna, which Professor Reddock and I have often commented on? The origins of Bindi as a primeval marking on the body to designate childbearing status and thus the fear of female fertility has its parallels in other cultures, such as scarification and tattooing. What are the markings today, and how have these traditional female spaces or feminine markers been appropriated and transformed, not only among Indo-Caribbean women, but other groups of women? This book opens up both an internal conversation as well as room for dialogues across ethnic groups and regions. The influence of such an uncovering on artistic creation, including photography, as we can see in the exhibition, small exhibition here on Bindis and other Indian cosmetic forms, on film, essays, and fictional works remain untapped. We must thank Roseanne for her commitment to this area of work and to the major contribution that she has made to an expanding, rich, and textured Indo-Caribbean feminist and gender scholarship. Again, I want to congratulate Roseanne, to invite you to buy those books that she has brought here. It will still be on sale at UWI Press, on the net, I imagine, so that Roseanne will write us many, many more books. Thank you.
And after Professor Pat Mohammed's contribution, I think we are all even more encouraged now to delve into what Bindi has to offer. Next on the agenda, we have the relevance of Bindi to the Hindu community, which is brought to you by Pandita Dr. Indrani Ramprasad, who is the founding president and also the current president of the Hindu Women's Organization. And I'm told that she has been involved in women's activism since 1985, which is a very, very long time. She is currently employed as a community development officer at the Land Settlement Agency, and she is Trinidad and Tobago's first state-licensed female pundit. A great accomplishment, a great lady. Let us welcome Pandita Dr. Indrani Ramprasad.
Namaste. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, members of the head table. Roseanne, lovely to see you again. I want to congratulate the editor, Roseanne, who I know, for many, many years. Though we have not been in touch for a long time, Brenda always keeps me updated about what's going on. Congratulations to a masterpiece and to yet another text that contributes so richly to the growing literature on Indian and Hindu women. Such academic writings and even creative writings are few and far between. Yet we seem to be writing richly as columnists and journalists, that is Hindu and Indian women. And I wonder, are we still so locked into the vicious cycle of earning a living that we have no time to create, and that when we do, the market does not support it. This text is important to Hindu women in particular, because very often what is defined as Indian is really based on a majority culture that is Hindu. How far the text will reach the women at the masses is another issue. Very often such texts remain within the walls of the academy, and it is to be remembered that Hindus have the highest rate of illiteracy in the country. So we need to find other methods of taking this text to the community, using the text, bringing it some new methods. The editor Rosanne Kanhai used the Bindi as a metaphor for freedom, pride, and boldness, being located in the middle of the forehead as it is. The Bindi is today more decorative, and its history goes back to its influence on the third eye. Men also use a tikka on this spot. Married women traditionally wore the red Bindi as they did sindoor. And as Anila said, we don't remember our parents wearing Bindi. It became a little fashionable thing later on. Even the sari, as you talked about the sari, we had debated that with Anita Chandra, that Singh I remember. My grandmother used to wear saris. So there was something, we had like a sari too, but the sari as you see it now is a little different. Chapters 1 and 2 critique the patriarchal dictates of Indian religions and trace a pattern of resistance by women who remained within the religion, and I quote here, and developed subversive interpretations and performances of religious texts and practices, end of quote. I aver that an understanding of Hindu Dharma or Sanatan Dharma outside of Western and Abrahamic constructs of religion is absolutely vital to appreciating why Hindu women had many spaces of freedom that allowed them many freedoms and that empowered them to accept and reject what they wanted out of the traditions. Very often, writers conflate religious norms and cultural norms when it comes to Hindu Dharma. I don't like the word Hinduism because it is a colonial definition given to us. We called ourselves practitioners of Sanatan Dharma. That is the new Sanatan Dharma. And so you will find that the approach of some writers writing about Hindu Dharma is that of, and I quote, caste, cows, and curry. They use that lens in the Western world. Caste, cows, and curry. Yes, there are patriarchal norms amongst Hindus, but it's also a reality that these are also challenged within the very community. There are many women, saints, swamis, and so on, going way back in a community that upheld the primacy of men as spiritual leaders. As a child, I was always empowered by the strong Devis in the Hindu tradition. A paradox in Hindu Dharma for me is how two opposed streams can flow harmoniously alongside or in different directions. There isn't that, like you find in the Western world, a violent confrontation. Like, for example, when I became a Pandita, there was objection, there was acceptance, and it went side by side. It wasn't something like, a black and white, cut off. The Ramayana tradition itself is one that has seen its adherents interpreting Sita in time and space, while they continue to uphold many of the family principles in the text. This is an excellent example of how a text comes alive for people and means different things to them in different times. While patriarchal constructs do exist, there are many Hindu women's traditions that give freedom and empowerment. The white woman's burden is not the same as the Hindu woman's. I agree with the author that, and I quote, the challenge for women is how to confront gendered oppression within Hinduism, end of quote. We have been doing that in many non-confrontational and even sometimes confrontational ways. The Ramprasad, and before it, the Bhagavad Quran and the Mahabharata were texts that guided Hindu spiritual, moral, and ethical life. The storytelling style appealed to the masses. It guided their lives. Since around the 80s, there's been an ascendance of other texts like Gita and Upanishads that are more philosophical in nature and appealing to a more educated clientele. So since around the 80s, there has been an ascendance of these new texts. I mean, they're old texts for us, but coming into Trinidad, the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads that were more philosophical. The Vedas have been with us since Arya Samaj missionaries have been coming here since 1910. So we've had all the texts, the major texts of India in our midst. But the masses, the Ramprasad took ascendancy in that regard. These have all shaped how the Hindu tradition looked at women. The texts were changing, the socio-cultural setting was changing, and education was a great influence on the minds of women. An important point of reflexivity or self-consciousness for the Indian Trinidadian came in 1935 with the advent of the first Indian movie, when for the first time they were seeing things Indian on the new medium of the big screen. And we were talking about going back. There was a reawakened interest in things Indian. Historically, while Indian movies were making a sort of Sanskritization because they themselves carried a heavy Western influence. If you look at old Indian movies, the dress and the mannerisms and so on were very Western. So while we thought they were real Indian, they themselves were also hybrid. So it was a sort of Sanskritization, and we were looking at it as pure Indian because it's coming from India. And it had an impact on Indians in India, in Trinidad, and at the same time, Creolization and Westernization were also taking place, and women were moving increasingly from private space into new public space, which was a catalyst for women entering Ram Leela in the public space and which would influence styles in Indian dancing. By World War II, I want to go back a little bit into history. By World War II, a few iconic Indian women dancers come singers. In those days, you had to do both. You had to dance and sing. Couldn't do one. Dancers and singers were on the public stage in Trinidad and Guyana and were part of cultural troupes that toured the region. These cultural troupes consisted of both males and females. The women entered as dancers and singers. They imitated what they saw in the movies, Indian and Western, layering these imitations with their instinctive folk dance footworks and movements. And I must admit, women who danced in those days, and even up to as I recall, didn't have a good reputation. They were not considered a good reputation. Today we applaud them as great women. I imagine later in history we'll say the first Pandita also was not of good reputation. In the 1930s to 40s, Guyana saw the emergence of a new dance narrative style called the Rajdhar. And that style was intricate footwork and soft, subtle hip movements as part of the storytelling. This thing was telling a story, the dance. It is in this period that women started dancing in the public in Guyana. Come back to Trinidad. Alice Jahn, born in 1895 and is still trying to figure out when she died, was renowned for her beauty and dancing skills and is said to be the first Indian Trinidadian woman to break the taboo of women performing in public space. She was a great woman for her beauty and so on, was in great demand, and she died in a poorhouse. St. James Infirmary, Dr. G. She would open up the way for other women to follow. Other famous women of the period were Champa Devi, a star dancer, and Noor Jahan as a main female singer. In Guyana, there was Gracie Devi and Peter Piari. Hindu women have always danced in private, festive, and ritual space. Although women started breaking the taboo of dancing in public space, the taboo continued to hold sway well into the late 1980s. Folk women were therefore making important strides with the help of men. And I want to underline this. Even when I became a Pandita, it wasn't only women. In fact, some women were against me. Many men supported me. And we have men in the Hindu tradition who have been very supportive. I have not found the Hindu man to be so obstructive that it will really stop you. I mean, even the first female Pandit, for example, 1924, Pandita Devi, when she took that bold move, she still practices as a Pandit. She's living in California in one of those homes now, but she continued. There was objection and there was some fuss, and she continued doing her thing. Folk women, as I said, were making important strides with the help of men. It is notable that the pioneers in Trinidad were Muslim women. Alice Jan, Champa Devi, and Nur Jahan were all Muslim women. Hindu women were then constrained by taboos about middle class. When we were coming up middle class, the middle class lifestyle was like you couldn't work. You couldn't be a working housewife. You had to be at home. That was a middle class symbol that the man could take care of you and so. Today those taboos are gone. And some Hindu women are on quite the other extreme, freely engaging in the most sexually explicit kind of dancing in public chutney space. I ask, is this freedom or is this bondage? Paradoxically, many Muslim women are returning to earlier practices of segregation and the hijab, though not quite as strict as before. I say it is all part of finding ourselves, and that women should be free to choose their lifestyles. So that if we decide to cover our heads and not dance and sing alongside men, that should be our right. And if I decide not to wear orni and no dupatta, that's my right too. Provided that these decisions we make are freely made, right? Not that somebody else is forcing us to do this. As members of society, our freedoms and rights end when we breach the space of others. So I know, when we want freedoms and rights, we also have to be aware that we are members of society too. My fear is that when we call for women to have rights and we don't balance this with an equally forceful call for responsibility, we end up with chaos. Is that the kind of freedom for which we fight? And I always draw a little example of people saying, a bikini is okay for the beach. And then you say, okay, but I could wear this much, and I could wear this much in the office too. And the office wear becomes almost half naked these days when you walk into an office. So there are rights and freedoms and duties and responsibilities that we need to balance. In the Hindu tradition, we are quite strict on that. I close with congratulating the editor again and writers in Bindi. And I really wish, I always lament at this university, we don't see people of Indian origin doing Indian things. When I started doing my research at UTT in Ramleela, and I asked Dr. Sherry-Ann Singh at the university here, could you get me some of your students that I would work with for Ramleela? And we couldn't get. I never got a single one. So you are not studying your own traditions. So we don't have an innate perspective, an insider's perspective. So I end with that prayer, that books like Bindi and your kind of inspiration from the writers here would encourage, and I wish that you would go out to those young people right in the university, encourage them to research these relevant topics. And with that, I end. Thank you very much, and namaste to all. Which one is mine?
Thank you very much, Pandita. As we have probably witnessed here today, that Pandita is a woman of great passion in three of the topics that Bindi touches on, which is religion, culture, and the promotion of women. So hence her speech was vigorous and enthusiastic. Thank you once again. Before I introduce our next item, I would just like to recognize the presence of Pandit Ramprasad Parashram, Professor Bringsley Samaru, Professor Rhoda Reddock, Professor Bridget Berreton, and the First Secretary, of the Indian High Commission, Sunita Pahuja, who are all with us today. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. Our next item is brought to you by a former president of the Hindu Women's Organization. She is also the founding president of SATI, which represents serving and aspiring towards helping individuals. She's a recipient of the National Award for Social and Cultural Studies. She's a woman who has dedicated her life to people and to contributing to the lesser fortunate of society. Please put your hands together and welcome Rosemary Kanhai to bring us a Pichakari rendition.
Namaste. Now I'm going to sing without music, and after hearing all these lovely speeches and the nice voices, boy, I'm wondering like I want to shake here. Anyway, I'm a woman, so I'm going to be brave. My song this evening is on Rakshas Lover. It is a song that will tell you about men who would tell women, they go to them and they give them all the love, they promise everything, and they go by these nice ladies with all the bindi and the sindoor and the Indian wear, but you don't know what they are suffering behind when they go with men like these. Any form of violence against women is not cultural, it is a crime. When you get married, I know like in the churches, I can't remember hearing that when I got married in the Hindu religion, until death do us part. But we have to think about what death they are talking about. Is it natural death or it is violent death? You tell me that you love me, you tell me you really care. You tell me, darling, in this life I'll never have to fear. You tell me that you love me, you tell me you really care. You tell me, darling, in this life I'll never have to fear. You whispered sweet nothing, all inside my ear. You kissed away the little drops of pearl-like looking tear. You whispered sweet nothing, all inside my ear. You kissed away the little drops of pearl-like looking tear. You promised you would bring the moon and stars on earth for me. Love had made me so blind, there was nothing else to see. You tell me that you love me, you tell me you really care. You tell me, darling, in this life I'll never have to fear. The very thought of you roused the love within my heart. I thought just like Siamese twins we could never be apart. The very thought of you roused the love within my heart. I thought just like Siamese twins we could never be apart. So close we were together, so much love we often shared. So many times I wanted you to know how much I cared. You tell me that you love me, you tell me you really care. You tell me, darling, in this life I'll never have to fear. As time went by and the children came, then love was not the same. No longer were there loving words, but cuff and kick and blame. As time went by and the children came, then love was not the same. No longer were there loving words, but cuff and kick and blame. Not blinded in love anymore, I now began to see a Rakshas in his true form standing right in front of me. You tell me that you love me, you tell me you really care. You tell me, darling, in this life I'll never have to fear. You're cutting and you're carving and you're amputating me. You're making weapon marks all over my body. You're cutting and you're carving and you're amputating me. You're making weapon marks all over my body. No anesthetic given, high blood pressure in my vein. Yet you claim you love me while instilling me with pain. You tell me that you love me, you tell me you really care. You tell me, darling, in this life I'll never have to fear. As my soul now leaves my body, I can hear the people say, she should have taken her children and tried to run away. As my soul now leaves my body, I can hear the people say, she should have taken her children and tried to run away. But when I was calling out for help for me and my family, Yes, when I was calling out for help for me and my family, no mother, father, friend or foe wanted to assist me. You tell me that you love me, you tell me you really care. You tell me, darling, in this life I'll never have to fear. So children of this nation, hear what I say to you. Love is very beautiful when it is shared by two. So children of this nation, hear what I say to you. Love is very beautiful when it is shared by two. But love don't mean to be abused and having to live in fear. The law is here to protect you and show it really care. So love not only with your heart but also with your head. Love not only with your heart but also with your head. And never live with someone who would love to see you dead. Never live with someone who would love to see you dead. I say never live with someone who would love to see you dead.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a moment we have all gathered here for. Dr. Rosanne Kanhai is a professor of English and director of Women's Studies, Western Washington University, Bellingham, Washington. Her areas of research and teaching are Caribbean women, post-colonial studies, feminist theory and criticism, and post-colonial and global studies. Besides creative non-fiction and journal articles, her publications include The Green-Faced Man, Rage and Renewal, and as editor of Matikur, The Politics of Identity for Indo-Caribbean Women, and she now brings to you Bindi, The Multifaceted Lives of Indo-Caribbean Women. The woman of the hour, let us all stand and welcome Dr. Rosanne Kanhai.
I didn't really expect a starting welcome, but thank you all very much. I could start with a correction, which I will explain as I go along, which is that I'm no longer a professor at Western Washington University. But I guess the press doesn't really know how to address me anymore because that's my professional title, and I don't have a professional title anymore, and I will explain as I go along why I've been forced to give up my professional life, the formal official aspects of my professional life. So just to kind of put that on the table, I wasn't sure if how much I would be able to speak tonight, and really pleased that there is a microphone here where I can sit, because I don't think I can, I just can't really emotionally do it right now, so I can trust my legs to stand. So thanks for, straining your neck this evening. I will do my best. Let me start by Hindu Women's Organization and the Institute for Gender Development Studies for organizing this event, and thanks to all of you for making the time to come here to share, to celebrate the collection, Bindi, The Multifaceted Lives of Indo-Caribbean Women. Special thanks to the analysts. I don't need to, I cannot at this point really respond to you because I've been taking notes and reflecting on what you've been saying. You've given me a lot to think about, and you're pushing my thinking forward. This is why I'm here, and I need to sort of collate my notes and before I can make a statement that is really worthy of the thought that you have put into the work that you have done. Okay? Nabi, Pat Mohammed, and Johnny Ramprasad, thank you very much for contributing to this event. And of course, their performers, Vishala Sivdat and Rosemary, thank you very much. And I want to take a moment here to reflect on Matikur, the politics of identity for Indo-Caribbean women, because this is what sort of set me on the path that has taken me to Bindi. And it was the first collection to articulate the self-conscious thoughts and experience of Indo-Caribbean women. And I want to pause here to honor all the original contributors. Some of them are here tonight, and I would like to mention them by name. Brenda Gopi Singh, Shira Ramprasad, I guess she isn't here. I thought she would be here when I was writing this. Rwanda Baksh, Injani Ramprasad, Patricia Mohammed. Thanks for sticking with me, girlfriends. I'm so happy to see you here. But I will go straight on to Bindi and to say thanks to all Bindi contributors, thanks to family, friends, colleagues who have given me support and who have held this space for me here. It seems like, I'm worlds away, universes away from the UWI campus, from the Hindu women, for the women that I see around me here. And when I get back, my family, my friends, my colleagues are just there. It's like I never left. So I want to say thanks to you for holding this space for me that, in the deep recesses of my mind, it's a space that I know I can always come back to. It's something that energizes me and keeps me going both professionally and personally. So I want to thank you for this. I want to thank also UWI Press for the award of best-selling collection. I guess I should not be thanking the press. I should be thanking the book, the contributors, and the way the whole book came together so that they had to give us this award. It was not an award that somebody decided to give us. It was an award that the book gave itself because the award is the best-selling collection, right? So I think we can thank ourselves and the book for that. And that you are here to celebrate not only the launch, but the award, which we did not know was coming. Okay, so what are we celebrating? And I was tickled when my colleague Pat Mohammed mentioned the sniper because I had written him into my speech as well. Because I had a discussion with a friend and ex-student of mine, Sadika Khan, who is in the audience tonight, who reminded me of V.S. Naipaul's statement that when a Hindu woman, I think he did say Hindu, puts a dot on her forehead, which is what he called it, she's announcing to the world that she has nothing in her head. She has nothing in her head. So, here's our challenge to you, Sir Vivian. Are you now willing to read how we have constructed the Bindi, or the dot on our foreheads, as a place of resistance, creativity, and empowerment? Do you think he's going to read it? I don't think so. I can take a pretty good guess.
He reads everything.
He reads everything?
Yeah.
Maybe he'll even respond, right? But, that kind of love-hate relationship that we have with him, I couldn't get through the evening without invoking him. So now I'm going to be a little sober and a little sad because this is also a sad moment for me. And I hope I can get through this. As some of you know, I've been very ill over the last 4 or 5 years. As some of you also know, that in the depths of my illness, my husband died. This happened towards the end of last May, so it's still pretty fresh in my mind. This is the first time I felt strong enough to make the trip to Trinidad, so I asked for a moment of this launch to join me in honoring him. Those of you who met him know of his devotion to me, his unconditional support of my work, his embrace of Caribbean culture. So, as to you all, you were with me every step of the way, and this award, this launch is just as much for you. Thank you. So, the last 4 or 5 years have been a pretty, not pretty, but very deep and dark valley for me. And through it, I have had a lot of questions and doubts about the paths I've taken, the ways in which I've channeled my energies and utilized my skills. And one of the questions that I struggled with was how to integrate the reclamation and celebration of ethnicity and ancestry in my work, with my personal struggles with sickness and sorrow and death. What was the value, I asked myself, of Amaticore poetics or Bindi poetics if I discarded them when I was faced with the harsh realities of life and death? What of Bindi, I asked myself? Is this just play as opposed to real life? Is it something exotic? Is it something academic that I'm doing because there's an academic need? Is it something socially political? Is it something feminist? And it has to be all of that, but it has to be also something that supports me in real life. So I spent quite a bit of time, really going through that very deeply, and I now put that question to you. I put it to you as I immersed myself in Bindi, individual chapters, the chapter authors, who are my friends and colleagues, the writing of the introduction, which compelled me to research and think through the philosophy and cosmology of Bindi. I came to know Bindi as a microcosm of the universe, such as the Tibetan monks realize in the creation of mandalas. And some of you might have seen some of these mandalas. Sometimes they make them in sand, in colored sand, or different kinds of markings. I came to see it as a representation of the female sex, a tribute to the procreative potential that is woman. I inhabited Bindi. It was a powerful place to be. And with cancer as my constant companion, Bindi led me. I would have to say led me because I can't find any other words to say, to an Ayurvedic clinic in Bellevue, Washington, and to Ayurvedic practitioners who I need to mention, my name, Dr. Sodi. And I came to understand cancer in a way that is quite different. And I do have a point in this, okay, from Western medical science. I came to see it. I came to see cancer itself, not other. I came to understand it as something that is of me, that is with me, and a sort of a grim dance partner. So I'm not going to go into details about all the Ayurvedic herbs, diets, massages, meditations, chants, and so on that are part of my treatment. But I do want to say that my doctor treats me medically as well as functions as a spiritual mentor to me. And I needed to say this here because I knew that without that I would not be here. And I did say to myself and to him that the first opportunity I have to publicly thank him and honor him, I would do so. So that's why I'm using this space to do this. However, I'm not going to, yes, please give it. I'm not going to, but I want to do this, but say that I'm not here to advertise Ayurvedic science, but to say that taken to its logical possibilities, this also is Bindi. Bindi, as I have come to see it, is a poetic and mythic expression of Ayurveda as a science that seamlessly addresses all aspects of life. And even as I say this, I search for the words because the language that I have is inadequate since the system is one of signification of semiosis. So this is something that I'm still thinking through and finding words, and I hope I'm just putting some seeds out there that people can reflect on and help me to reflect as well. I saw Bindi as fullness, that's the word I can use, as collapsing boundaries of opposites and offering a world of infinite dimensions. I see it, as I said in my book, as constantly alive, shaping, reshaping itself in a flow of eternal creativity, and that this act of creativity, this process of creativity, as something that we reenact every time we put on a Bindi. Its poetics, its philosophy, its possibilities, as I have theorized, in the introduction of the collection. It's seeing the truth through the unfathomable depths of the third eye of reflection. And I encourage you all to explore and inhabit Bindi in all its fullness. It is a way of being, of knowing, of experiencing life that is not the same as Western European thinking. No one should know better than us as Caribbean peoples that we can draw on philosophies and cosmologies of different civilizations, of Africa, of India, of China, of the Middle East. But how often do we do that in real life? When we claim ancestry, when we claim ethnicity, do we also claim ancestral philosophies and cosmologies, ethics and practices? Do we make them part of our lives? When we are really in distress, where do we turn for assistance or comfort? Do we discard ethnicity at that time because we have faith only in Western medical science? That's the question that I want to leave. I'm not saying that we do not take advantage of Western European knowledge. I'm suggesting that we consider, explore, and draw on other systems of knowledge, some of which have been developed thousands of years before Western civilization. What's the value of ethnic identity if we only have faith in Western systems? Our identity as Caribbean is so rich in its hybridity, but can we explore it, or do we explore it in more ways than cultural expression? Music, performance arts, cuisine, fashion, all those are great in our hybridity and they've been developed. That's cool. But what about science? Where is science that comes from other civilizations? What are the other sciences? What are other systems of ethics, of law, of governance, agriculture, architecture, and so on and so on? Where do we go? I think we are developing the systems, but perhaps it's happening piecemeal, or perhaps it is just getting swallowed up by mainstream thinking. So now we need to move to the next step, to organize, to theorize, to legitimize, so that we have a logic that draws on, makes sense, and improves the world that we actually live in, not a theoretical world that was handed to us. Okay, so again, I just want to leave those questions with you, to thank you all for listening, and to thank you all for being here, thank those of you who made active contributions. Thank you.
Invite Mrs. Brenda Gopi Singh to lead us through the next part of the program. Mrs. Gopi Singh is an independent researcher, a business entrepreneur, and a community activist. She's a founding member and ex-president of the Hindu Women's Organization of Trinidad and Tobago. She has served on the board of the network of NGOs for the advancement of women and was its assistant coordinator from 2002 to 2004. Mrs. Gopi Singh has co-authored a workbook, The Dynamics of Family Violence and How to Plan Workshops, and initiated publication of the Hindu Women's Magazine. She's a director at Regal Products, and incidentally, Mrs. Gopi Singh works also featured in this publication, Bindi. And Mrs. Gopi Singh, I now invite you to lead us through the next part of the program.
Mine is a simple task of making a presentation to Rosanne Kanhai, editor of Bindi, The Multifaceted Lives of Indo-Caribbean Women. We want to thank her for all the time she has spent to build our awareness and to raise our consciousness about our inner selves. And I now call on Anila Balkaran. Yes, I'm presenting this to the NCIC library.
Oh, okay.
So on behalf of Hindu women in the IGDS, thank you for being here. And Vishala Suda. I'm presenting this on behalf of Hindu women and IGDS for Hindu Tribe Theatre Library. Thank you.
Very much, Mrs. Gopi Singh. You all have been a very attentive audience, and we have very much come to the end of our program. And before we conclude, we invite Ms. Anjali Gajra, who is the treasurer of the Hindu Women's Organization, to deliver the expressions of gratitude.
We want to say thank you first and especially to the Institute for Gender and Development Studies for partnering with us and having this book launch and being so fantastic with all of the requests and the re-requests and the change of requests. Thank you so much. Especially Dr. and I hope I pronounced this right, Dr. Pia Pansapa, the head of IGDS, Ms. Soma Hunt, the outreach officer, who answered questions and helped get things organized, Ms. Catherine Chan, who helped with the media relations and the logistics for today. Thank you, Catherine. And everybody else who helped, because I'm sure there are other people you'll call on. Thank you again, everyone at IGDS. And then our speakers, Anila Balkaran and Sarah Nabi, Pat Mohammed, who I see everybody here knows personally, and Pandita Dr. and Ramprasad. The performers, Vishal Sudat and Rosemary kind of brought tears to my eyes there with that. And the Ministry of Gender, Youth and Child Development, who has helped us with funding for this launch. Renuka Kangal for being so kind to cheer through all of this and the small interruptions and lateness, and did a great job, I thought. And of course, Ms. Brenda Gopi Singh, I'm not going to go into all of that again. I think we all want to get to the after now. But Brenda worked really hard on this with emails and back and forth and all the running up and down. And she was the first person here today from our group and calling with all of us for being late in traffic. But Brenda did a great job. That is her job if you're organizing. Don't look like that. Brenda did a great job. And I do want to say thank you, Brenda, so much. And last but obviously not least, Rosanne Kanhai for putting together the book and having the vision to see the connecting factors to bring all of that together. I am not a reader of nonfiction. And yes, I read the book and I did love it. Thank you, Rosanne, very much. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Anjali. And Anjali, just to follow on your heels, most importantly, I think thank you to each and every one of you, for without the presence of everyone here, I don't think we would have had such a successful book launch. And I do remind you that copies of the book Bindi are on sale at a mere $240, and Dr. Kanhai will be signing copies. So feel free to proceed and purchase your book. Also, refreshments have been prepared. You to my left, you can partake. And to each and all, a safe journey home, and thank you once again. Good night.